This video is going to look specifically at a nephron, or the anatomy, the parts that make up a nephron. The nephron is the structural unit of the kidneys. So all of the activity that happens in the kidneys are going to be in these structures that are called nephrons. And each of your kidneys has over 1 million nephrons in them. So there are tons of these individual units that are found within your kidneys. So before we kind of get started in looking at the different parts of the nephron, I just really want to show you this picture to help orientate yourself. So remember, here's the medulla right here, and then here's the cortex. And you can see here is a structural unit of a nephron. And you can see that part of it, the top part here, is going to be up in the cortex, in the renal cortex. And then there's going to be parts that are going to loop down into the medulla. And so all of these different units are going to line the kidneys. And like I said earlier, you've 1 million of these roughly per kidney. So there's just a lot of them. So here's a diagram of the nephron. And this diagram, again, is included so that you can see or download it and use it to take notes. I'm going to put a line right here, again, just to kind of orientate ourselves and indicate that this up here is going to be within the cortex. And then this part will be found within those medulla and the medullary pyramids, right? Just so that you kind of have an idea of that. We're going to start actually with looking at how the blood enters into the nephron. So remember when we talked about those arteries and the veins, the interlobular ones? Well, they're going to eventually get smaller and smaller into capillaries and arterioles that are going to enter into here. So we're going to kind of draw this out like this. Okay. Now, this structure that's in red here is called the glomerulus. And basically, I'm going to put that arrow there in the middle. The glomerulus is going to be a bunch of capillaries. So this is going to be the afferent arterial. Okay, so blood's going to kind of enter in through here. And this is called the efferent arterial, where it's going to go through the glomerulus, which are a bunch of capillaries. Nutrients are going to get exchanged into this next structure, which we'll label here in a second. Okay, and then the blood will enter out the efferent. All right. So this group of capillaries, which is a glomerulus, that's what this is in here. Now you can see that they're housed within this structure that is called the Bowman's capsule. And the Bowman's capsule, so we'll kind of put that maybe in green here, so we'll kind of shade this green. That's going to be this structure that's right here. Okay, think of it in terms of it's like really a capsule that's going to hold this glomerulus, right? So it's kind of right there. The next section is going to be called the proximal convoluted tubules. And convoluted just means that it's twisted. So the proximal convoluted, and that's this twisty section that's going to be right here. Okay, so I'm going to color this kind of orangish. The next section, and in the next lecture video, when we talk about exactly what is happening here, there's things that are going to be happening in each part. So the proximal convoluted tubules are going to be lined with simple cuboidal cells. And these simple cuboidal cells, so if we kind of drew them in here, we can kind of draw them in. Those simple cuboidal cells have two different surfaces, right? They have the inner surface, which is the basal surface, and then they have the outer surface, which is called the apical surface. So simple cuboidal epithelial tissue. That's what's going to line the proximal convoluted tubules. So things are going to eventually be able to go in and out of these epithelial cells. So it's simple because, again, we only want one layer. If things are coming and going, it provides less for them to go through, and then they'll be shaped as cuboidals. Then we're going to go to the next structure down here, which is this big loop. And this one is actually named in a really easy and convenient way to remember, and it is called the Loop of Henle. So looking down this way, this is called the Loop of Henle. Now, the loop of Henle is going to be made up of squamous cells. So those kind of flattened shells. And again, a single layer because eventually things are going to be going in and out of the loop of Henle. But just know that the epithelial changes in this loop because it's going to have a different kind of function than what's happening up in the proximal convoluted tubules. So this is going to be simple squamous epithelial. So that takes us to the last part, well, I guess not the last part, the second to last part of our nephron here, which is another twisty type of tube. So it's going to be convoluted again. So we'll kind of put this right here. And it's called the distal convoluted tubule, the distal convoluted tubule. And then finally we end up with this long tube right here, which, if you remember from the diagram, is going to be connected on this side to the distal proximal tubule of another nephron. So the two nephrons will dump into these structures here, and these are going to be called the collecting duct. Now, as I mentioned, everything that's going on within the kidney, all of the functions, and specifically the cleaning, filtering of blood, the reabsorption of the nutrients that we want in the blood, and then the making of urine is going to occur within these structures. And so the next video is going to talk exactly how urine is formed within these different types of structures. The distal convoluted tubule is also going to be made up of that squamous, or it's not squamous, cuboidal epithelial tissue. So simple cuboidal, just like in the proximal. So we got the glomerulus, which is this group of capillaries that are housed within a structure called the Bowman's capsule. It then turns into this twisted loop that's called the proximal convoluted tubule. Those tubes will eventually loop down into the medulla in a structure called the Loop of Henle, which is made of simple squamous epithelial, and then come back up. So this is actually called the descending loop of Henle. So descending, and this is called the ascending loop. And then this is going to be lined with simple squamous epithelial as it comes back up in the ascending loop to the distal convoluted tubule, which again will be lined with simple cuboidal epithelial, and then dump into this long tube here, which is called the collecting duct. And on this side over here, there would be another nephron, specifically the DCT of a nephron on this side, so that you have two nephrons dumping into that collecting duct at once.